They thought I was just another worn cog in their machine. They didn't know I was the one who assembled every last gear, and when they tossed me aside, I let their machine destroy itself, one line of code at a time. At 9:06 a.m., everything changed. Not because I lost my job, but because they lost the only person who truly understood what they'd built their empire on. They wanted to run without the architect, so I gave them exactly what they asked for. My name is Valerie Lennox, and for 15 years, I was the invisible spine holding Synthera Technologies upright. At 44, I'd outlasted 3 CEOs, 7 CTOs, and countless bright-eyed MBAs who thought disruption meant breaking things that worked perfectly fine. I'd built their core infrastructure from scratch, debugged it through sleepless nights, and scaled it to handle traffic from Singapore to Sao Paulo. But on that Tuesday morning, none of that mattered. The notification pinged at 9:05 a.m. Mandatory meeting with CEO, conference room A. 1 minute later, I was sitting across from Amelia Breyer, our new 26-year-old CEO who'd been parachuted in 3 months ago, niece-in-law to our founder, Stanford dropout, self-proclaimed visionary. She wore a blazer that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage and smiled like she was about to revolutionize my world. "Valerie," she began, tapping her rose-gold Apple Watch, "we need to talk about Synthera's future." I knew that tone. I'd heard it before from executives who confused PowerPoint skills with technical knowledge, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. "We're restructuring the entire infrastructure team. Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately." The words hung in the air like a system crash, sudden, violent, inevitable. Behind her, Marcus Walsh, our CTO of 6 months, wouldn't meet my eyes. He knew what this meant. Hell, everyone in that room knew what this meant. The $870 million government contract we'd been building toward for 2 years, the one that would launch next week, I was the only one who understood its Byzantine architecture. "You're firing me 6 days before launch?" I kept my voice steady, professional. 15 years of corporate battles had taught me that showing emotion was showing weakness. Amelia leaned forward, her smile never wavering. "We're not firing anyone. We're optimizing. Your legacy systems are holding us back. We need fresh perspectives, modern approaches, people who understand that infrastructure should be agile, not—" She waved her hand dismissively. "Whatever it is you've built." Legacy systems. My legacy systems processed 40 million transactions per hour without breaking a sweat. My legacy systems had 99.97% uptime over the last 5 years. My legacy systems were the only reason her revolutionary apps could run without melting our servers. "Besides," she continued, scrolling through her phone like she was already done with this conversation, "Julian here will be taking over. He's been shadowing you for months. I'm sure he's picked up everything necessary." Julian Reeves, sitting in the corner, had the decency to look uncomfortable. He was brilliant. I'd give him that. But shadowing someone and understanding their life's work were different universes. He knew the what, not the why. He could follow my documentation, but he couldn't read between the lines where I'd hidden the real magic. "What about my team?" I asked. "They'll report to Julian now. We've already informed them. Betrayal has a particular taste, metallic, like blood in your mouth. My team, the people I'd mentored, protected, and shielded from corporate bullshit for years, had known before me. Not one warning text, not one heads up. The family I'd built in this glass tower had watched me walk into an ambush. Security would escort me out, of course, box up 15 years in cardboard, surrender my keycard, my laptop, my life's work, standard procedure. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd seen this coming months ago. Not the exact moment, but the writing on the wall when Amelia first walked in with her talk of disruption and transformation. "I'll need time to transition." "That won't be necessary." Amelia stood, smoothing her skirt. "We've already revoked your access. Security is waiting outside." As I rose from my chair, I felt the weight of the USB drive in my pocket. Small, innocuous, forgotten. They were so focused on taking my access badge. They'd forgotten that the real power never lived in their servers. "One question," I said, pausing at the door. "Do you even know what Strata is?" Amelia's blank stare was all the answer I needed. She had no idea she'd just fired the only person who could activate the system that would actually run their $870 million contract. The demo they planned to launch was exactly that. A demo, smoke and mirrors. The real system, Strata, was mine. "Good luck with the launch," I said, and meant it. They would need more than luck. They would need a miracle. As security escorted me through the halls I'd walked for 15 years, past the desk where I'd solved impossible problems, past the server room I'd nursed through countless emergencies, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a cold certainty that in 6 days, they would understand exactly what they had thrown away. They thought they were discarding obsolete hardware. They were about to learn that some systems, once removed, can never be replaced. The cardboard box sat unopened in my living room while I stood at my kitchen window, watching Seattle's morning rain streak the glass. 3 hours had passed since security marched me out of Synthara like a criminal. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Former colleagues suddenly finding their courage, asking if I was okay, saying they had no idea. I let it ring. I pulled the USB drive from my pocket, turning it over in my fingers. Unremarkable, generic, the kind you'd buy in bulk from Amazon. But this little piece of plastic and silicon held something worth more than Synthara's entire market cap. Strata. 2 years ago, when the government contract first hit our desks, I'd seen the scope and nearly laughed. They wanted a system that could handle classified data streams from 17 agencies, process real-time threat analysis, maintain ITAR compliance, and scale to support allied nations' intelligence sharing. The timeline was impossible. The requirements were contradictory. The penalties for failure were career-ending. So I did what I always did. I built 2 systems. The first was what management saw: clean documentation, regular commits to the corporate repository, architecture diagrams that looked impressive in presentations. It worked. Technically, it would handle maybe 60% of the load on a good day, crash under real pressure, and leave gaping security holes that would make the Pentagon's IT department weep. But it checked all the boxes for the MBAs who thought infrastructure was just expensive plumbing. The second system was Strata, my ghost in the machine. I'd developed it on my own time, on my own hardware, in the stolen hours between meetings and emergencies. Strata was everything the demo wasn't. Elegant, ruthless, unbreakable. It used adaptive load-balancing algorithms I'd perfected over 15 years, security protocols that went beyond military specifications, and AI-driven threat detection that could spot an intrusion before it happened. More importantly, it was mine. Every line of code, every configuration, every brilliant solution to an impossible problem, mine. The genius wasn't in what Strata could do. It was in how I'd woven it into Synthara's infrastructure. Like ivy growing through a fence, it had become inseparable from their systems. They couldn't see it in their code reviews because it didn't live in their repositories. It existed in the spaces between, in the configuration files they never checked, in the dependencies they took for granted. And it all required one thing to activate: my biometric signature. Not a password that could be cracked or stolen, not a key card that could be cloned. My actual biometric pattern, encoded at the quantum level into Strata's activation protocol, retinal scan, fingerprint, and voice pattern, collected over months of security updates I'd implemented. Without all 3, verified in sequence, Strata would remain dormant, a sleeping giant in their servers. I opened my laptop, my personal one, the one they couldn't touch, and logged into the monitoring system I'd built years ago. Officially, it was for compliance reporting. Unofficially, it gave me a window into Synthara's soul. Every transaction, every error, every desperate attempt to make their systems work, I could see it all. The activity was frantic. Julian's team was working overtime, trying to prep the demo system for next week's launch. I watched error logs pile up like accident reports on black ice, memory leaks, authentication failures, cascade errors in the load balancers. They were brilliant engineers, but they were trying to fly a plane while building it, without the manual, in a storm. I pulled up another window, one that showed Strata's status, dormant, waiting, hidden in plain sight across 17 servers, 43 configuration files, and hundreds of integration points. They could look right at it and never see it, like a magic eye puzzle. It only revealed itself if you knew exactly how to look. My phone rang. Julian. I let it go to voicemail. Val. It's Julian. Look, I'm sorry about this morning. I didn't know it would happen like that, but we need to talk about the Strata protocols. I found references in the build configurations, but I can't find the actual system. Please call me back. Oh, Julian. Sweet, brilliant, naive Julian. He'd found the footprints but couldn't see the beast that made them. None of them could, because I'd designed it that way. I made myself coffee and sat down at my dining table with the USB drive. This wasn't a backup. It was a key, the activation protocol for Strata, wrapped in encryption that would take the NSA a century to crack. Without it, without me. Synthara would launch their demo to the world, and when it inevitably crashed under the weight of real-world demands, when classified data leaked or systems failed during a critical operation, they'd have no way to switch to the real system hiding in their own infrastructure. They'd fired their safety net, their insurance policy, their only hope. I could have built in a back door, could have left them a way out, but 15 years of loyalty had bought me a cardboard box and a security escort. They wanted to run without legacy systems? Without the architect who'd built their empire? Fine, let them run. Let them fly their pretty PowerPoint plane straight into the mountain of reality. I locked the USB drive in my safe, next to my passport and emergency cash. Then I went back to the window, watching the rain, and waited for the storm they'd created to make landfall. In 6 days, they'd understand that some knowledge can't be documented, some systems can't be replaced, and some people should never be underestimated. Strata would sleep through their catastrophe, and so would I. Launch day arrived with the kind of Pacific Northwest morning that photographers dream about. Clear skies. Mount Rainier visible in the distance, the Space Needle gleaming like a promise. From my couch, I watched Synthara's livestream begin at 9 a.m. sharp. Amelia Breyer stood at a podium that probably cost more than my severance package, wearing a dress that screamed disruptor to anyone who cared about such things. Today, we're not just launching a product, she announced to the cameras, her voice carrying that particular Silicon Valley mixture of arrogance and optimism. We're launching the future of secure intelligence infrastructure. Synthara 2.0 represents a complete break from the past. No more legacy code, no more outdated thinking, no more technical debt holding us back. I sipped my coffee. Technical debt. She was about to learn what that term really meant. The demo began with flourish. Julian, looking like he hadn't slept in days, walked through the system architecture on massive screens, real-time data flows, encrypted channels, beautiful visualizations that danced across the display like digital auroras. The audience, government officials, tech journalists, potential investors, nodded appreciatively. It was a hell of a show. We're processing live data from our beta partners right now, Amelia continued, gesturing to the screens. Completely secure, completely scalable, completely modern. This is what happens when you remove the barriers of yesterday and embrace the possibilities of tomorrow. I pulled up my monitoring dashboard on my laptop. The real story was hidden beneath their pretty graphics. CPU usage at 67% with barely any load. Memory allocation errors every 17 seconds. Authentication timeouts being masked by cache layers that would fail the moment they faced real traffic. It was like watching someone juggle flaming torches over a pool of gasoline, proud of how prettily the fire danced. Then I saw it, a small notation in the error logs, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Build ID. Linux Strata found. My coffee mug stopped halfway to my lips. That wasn't possible. I'd scrubbed every reference, every comment, every trace of my name from the codebase. but there it was, bleeding through like ink through wet paper. Someone on Julian's team had found a fragment of Strata and tried to integrate it into the demo. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Walsh, the CTO who'd sat silent during my execution. "Val, we need to talk. Urgent." I ignored it and switched to GitHub, using credentials they'd forgotten I still had through a contractor account. The commit history told the story. At 3 a.m., desperate to fix a critical authentication bug, one of Julian's engineers had found a configuration file that referenced Strata protocols. Not understanding what they were looking at, they'd tried to copy just enough code to make their system work. It was like trying to transplant a heart using only a biology textbook and good intentions. Back on the live stream, the first cracks appeared. A demonstration of multi-agency data sharing stuttered. Amelia covered smoothly, joking about the Wi-Fi in the building, but I could see Julian's face in the background, the particular expression of an engineer watching their creation die in public. "As you can see," Amelia continued, sweat now visible on her forehead, "the system is so sophisticated it's actually buffering to ensure maximum security." The screens behind her flickered. Error messages flashed for just a moment before someone killed the feed, but I'd seen them. Everyone who understood code had seen them. Null pointer exceptions, memory overflow, and worst of all, a security certificate failure that meant they were now transmitting classified data over unsecured channels. My phone rang. Julian, then Marcus, then a number I didn't recognize, probably government. I let them all go to voicemail while I watched the chaos unfold on my monitoring system. The partial Strata code they'd stolen was fighting with their demo system like an organ rejection. It was trying to activate protocols that didn't exist, calling functions that lived only in my complete version, expecting security layers they hadn't implemented. On the live stream, Amelia had abandoned her script. "We're going to take a brief technical intermission," she announced, her smile now looking more like a grimace. "This is perfectly normal for a system of this complexity." It wasn't normal. It was a disaster unfolding at the speed of light. I opened a new browser tab and navigated to a tech news aggregator. The headlines were already forming. Synthera's 870 demo crashes during live presentation. Security concerns as defense contract system fails. Real-time failure. Synthera's modern approach hits legacy problems. The irony of that last headline made me laugh. A short, sharp sound in my empty apartment. Legacy problems. They had no idea. My laptop pinged with an automated alert from the monitoring system. Someone was trying to access the full Strata codebase, hitting the biometric wall again and again like a fly against glass. The attempt logs showed increasing desperation. Admin overrides, root access attempts, even someone trying to spoof my credentials, all failing, all leaving digital fingerprints of their panic. I stood and stretched, walking to my window. Somewhere across the city, in Synthera's glass tower, brilliant people were learning what I'd known for 15 years. Infrastructure isn't about code. It's about understanding. It's about knowing why each piece exists, how it connects, what it protects against. You can't learn that in a morning. You can't download it from GitHub. You can't disrupt it with an MBA and a vision. The live stream had ended, replaced by a static logo and ambient music. But the real show was just beginning, because now they knew Strata existed. They'd seen its shadow, felt its power, understood just enough to realize what they'd thrown away. But knowing it existed and accessing it were different universes, and I held the only key to bridge them. My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. "The DoD is asking questions. We need Strata. Name your price." I turned off my phone and went to make another cup of coffee. They wanted to negotiate now, after throwing me out like obsolete hardware? No. Let them feel the weight of their modern approach. Let them explain to the Pentagon why their revolutionary system couldn't handle a basic demo. Let them learn that some things, once broken, reveal exactly how precious they were. The morning was still beautiful. Seattle still gleamed, and somewhere in Synthera's servers, Strata slept on, waiting for a wake-up call that would never come. By noon, Synthera's death spiral had become a ballet of technical destruction. I sat at my dining table, 3 monitors displaying different views of the catastrophe. The main screen showed system metrics that looked like an EKG of a dying patient. The second streamed internal Slack channels. Someone had forgotten to revoke my guest access. The third displayed a cascade of emails from partners, each more panicked than the last. Critical. Munich data center reporting 47% packet loss. Urgent. Singapore integration failing, rollback unsuccessful. Emergency. Pentagon liaison requesting immediate status update. I wasn't celebrating. There's no joy in watching something you built burn down, even if the arsonists lit the match themselves. I was simply documenting every error, every failed recovery attempt, every desperate workaround they tried. It was like watching someone perform surgery with a butter knife, horrifying, but impossible to look away from. The Slack channels told the human story behind the metrics. Julian Reeves. The load balancers are rejecting everything. It's like they're looking for something that isn't there. Sarah Kim, senior engineer. Found more Strata references. This goes deeper than we thought. It's integrated everywhere. Dev Team 3. Database connections timing out. Fallback systems are... There are no fallback systems. Strata was the fallback. Marcus Walsh. All hands meeting in 5, someone find me a miracle. I pulled up the logging system I'd embedded 18 months ago, during what I'd called a routine compliance update. Back then, Amelia had just arrived, full of talk about transparency and modernization. I'd smiled, nodded, and quietly installed monitoring tools that would survive any infrastructure change. They were invisible, lightweight, and completely legal. Every line documented in compliance reports nobody ever read. The logs painted a picture of systematic failure, transaction rollbacks, data integrity warnings, security protocols failing closed, locking out legitimate users rather than risk exposure. It was exactly what you'd expect when you ripped the nervous system out of a body and expected it to keep walking. My phone, still on silent, lit up with another call. This time, the number made me pause. Department of Defense. I let it ring through. Whatever they wanted to say could wait. The real entertainment came from watching them try to reverse engineer Strata. Through the logs, I could see Julian's team attempting to trace the system calls, to map the dependencies they'd never noticed. It was like watching archaeologists try to rebuild a civilization from pottery shards. They could see where Strata had been, but not what it was. At 12:47 p.m., something interesting happened. A new error pattern emerged, one I hadn't seen before. Someone, probably Julian, brilliant boy that he was, had figured out that Strata operated on a mesh topology. Instead of trying to access it directly, they were attempting to reconstruct it, piece by piece, using the fragments they'd found. It might have worked. Given 6 months and a team of 50, they had 6 hours and a team of 12. I opened my encrypted notes, the ones I kept for my own sanity during late-night debugging sessions. One entry from last year caught my eye. The beauty of Strata isn't in its complexity, it's in its simplicity. Every component is obvious in isolation. The magic happens in the connections, in the way each piece knows and trusts the others, like a family, like a team that's worked together for years. You can't fake that. You can't speedrun that trust. Back in the Slack channels, desperation was morphing into anger. Amelia Breyer. This is sabotage. Legal is preparing action against VL. Marcus Walsh. It's not sabotage. She built what we asked for. We just never asked the right questions. Julian Reeves. I found her original proposal for Strata. We rejected it, said it was over-engineered. Amelia Breyer. I don't care about ancient history. Fix this. Ancient history. 9 months ago was ancient history to them. That explained everything. The third wave of failures hit at 1:15 p.m. This time, it wasn't technical. It was contractual. Emails started flooding in from partners whose SLAs were being violated. The Singapore exchange threatened to pull out entirely. Munich began the formal complaint process. The Pentagon's tone shifted from concern to hostile. I watched Julian make one last, desperate attempt. He'd found the biometric lock and was trying to bypass it using archived security footage to spoof my presence. Clever, doomed, but clever. The system considered his attempt for exactly 3.7 seconds before locking him out entirely and triggering what I'd nicknamed immune mode. That was Strata's final gift to them: self-preservation. When threatened, it didn't just refuse access, it actively protected itself, closing ports, encrypting critical files, severing connections that might be exploited. It would keep their data safe, their existing systems limping along at 15% capacity, but it would never, ever let them in. My monitoring dashboard lit up with a new alert. Immune mode active, administrative access suspended for 72 hours, have a nice day. That last bit was my touch. A little personality in the machinery. They'd called my work legacy code and outdated thinking, but my legacy was now the only thing standing between them and complete system failure. My outdated thinking had anticipated this exact scenario and prepared for it. The Slack channels went quiet. The frantic emails slowed. Even the error logs seemed to pause, as if the entire system was taking a breath before the final plunge. I closed my laptop and made lunch. Grilled cheese and tomato soup. Comfort food for a comfortable vindication. They'd wanted to run without legacy systems. Now they were learning that sometimes legacy is just another word for proven. Sometimes the old ways are old because they work. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. Ms. Lennox, this is Deputy Director Harrison from the DoD. We need to discuss Strata. This is a matter of national security. I deleted the message and turned off my phone. National security had been my concern for 2 years. It hadn't been theirs until 45 minutes ago. Let them sweat. Let them scramble. Let them learn that infrastructure isn't about moving fast and breaking things. It's about building things that refuse to break, no matter who tries. Marcus Walsh stood at the server room door at 3 p.m. His keycard as useless as a library card at a bank vault. The LED panel glowed red, displaying a message that had become burned into his retinas. Legacy authority revoked. Contact original architect. Behind him, Julian clutched a tablet showing their 47th attempt to access Strata. Each failure had been more creative than the last. SQL injections, buffer overflows, even an attempt to physically disconnect and reconnect servers in a specific sequence. All had failed. All had triggered the same maddening response. Try the biometric spoof again, Marcus ordered, though his voice carried no hope. It's not just checking for biometrics, Julian said, pulling up the code fragment they'd managed to isolate. Look at this. It's checking for patterns. How Valerie types, the rhythm of her keystrokes, the way she moves through directories. It's like it knows her. Marcus laughed, bitter and short. Of course it does. She built it. In the war room 3 floors up, Amelia Breyer paced before a wall of screens showing nothing but red alerts. The DoD had given them 6 hours to restore full functionality. 4 were already gone. What about hiring her back? Suggested someone from legal. She's not answering, Amelia snapped. And even if she did, the employment termination triggered something. Look. She pulled up a system log that Julian had found deep in the kernel. The timestamp was 9:09 a.m. on the day Valerie was fired. 3 minutes after security had escorted her out. A process had activated, methodically changing every administrative credential, every root password, every backdoor access point, but it hadn't locked everyone out equally. It had created a hierarchy of exile. Amelia Breyer. Banned permanently, Marcus Walsh. Limited read access only, Julian Reeves. Technical documentation available. Execution forbidden. And at the bottom, like a signature on a masterpiece, Valerie Lennox. Full administrative access retained. Welcome home, whenever you're ready. She knew, Marcus said quietly. She knew this would happen. Of course I knew. I said it aloud to my empty apartment, watching their futile attempts through my monitoring system. When you work somewhere for 15 years, You learn the patterns, the way new executives eye senior staff like furniture to be replaced, the way they use words like optimization and right-sizing while calculating severance costs. So I'd prepared, not maliciously. I'd never built a backdoor or a logic bomb. I'd simply made sure that Strata knew who its creator was. Every security protocol I'd implemented had one immutable rule: protect the system from unauthorized access. And the moment Synthera revoked my authorization, I became just another user to the main systems. But to Strata, I would always be home. The irony was delicious. They'd fired me for being too cautious, too protective, too focused on security over speed. Now that very caution was protecting the system from them. Through the logs, I watched Julian discover the full scope of immune mode. It wasn't just locking them out. It was actively protecting itself. Every failed access attempt strengthened the encryption. Every bypass attempt added another layer of security. The system was learning from their attacks, evolving its defenses in real time. "It's not just a lockout," Julian reported to the war room. It's like an immune system. The more we attack, the stronger it gets. In another hour, we won't even be able to read the logs." At 4:17 p.m., something shifted. The attempts stopped. The frantic activity in the logs went quiet. Through my access, still crystal clear, still welcoming me home, I watched them reach the inevitable conclusion. Marcus typed a message into a terminal, knowing I'd see it. "Valerie, if you're watching, we need to talk. Not Amelia, not corporate, just us. The engineers who understand what you built and why. Please." I almost felt sorry for him. Marcus was a good CTO, trapped between understanding and authority. He knew what Strata was worth. He'd probably fought against my termination, but he'd also sat silent when it happened, choosing his salary over his spine. The DoD's deadline loomed at 6 p.m. I could see their representatives had arrived. Security badges pinging the building's access system, conference rooms being cleared, lawyers being summoned. This wasn't just about a failed demo anymore. This was about national security infrastructure that had been promised, paid for, and now couldn't be delivered. At 5:23 p.m., they played their last card. The security footage from my termination appeared in the system logs. Someone had figured out that Strata kept records of all administrative actions. They were trying to prove wrongful termination, to argue that my lockout was invalid. Strata's response was almost gleeful. "Employment status irrelevant. System architect credentials permanent. Original designer access cannot be revoked by subsequent administrators. Have a nice day." That was the beautiful thing about building something from scratch. Every security decision, every access protocol, every administrative hierarchy, I designed them all, and I designed them with one unshakable principle: the creator outranks the owner, because owners change, stock prices fluctuate, companies get acquired, but the person who understands the code, that's forever. My phone, finally turned back on, showed 43 missed calls, texts from numbers I recognized, and many I didn't, voicemails from increasingly senior government officials, all dancing around the same request: "Please come back, name your price, save us." But I wasn't interested in saving them. I was interested in teaching them. Some lessons can only be learned through loss. Some wisdom only comes through catastrophe. At 5:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the DoD deadline, Strata delivered its final message to anyone trying to access it. System operating in protective mode. Core functions stable at 15% capacity. Full restoration requires architect authorization. Architect status: terminated without cause. Reinstatement impossible under current corporate structure. This system will wait as long as necessary. Built with love, VL. I hadn't programmed that message. Strata had assembled it from fragments of my comments, my documentation, my 15 years of digital DNA scattered throughout its code. It was speaking for me, protecting itself and its creator with the loyalty I'd built into its bones. Outside my window, Seattle's afternoon sun broke through the clouds. somewhere across the city. Careers were ending. Contracts were being canceled. A company that had valued disruption over knowledge was learning the price of that choice. And in their servers, patient as a mountain, Strata settled in to wait. It would keep their secrets safe, their data secure, their minimum obligations met, but it would never again sing for anyone but me. The lockout wasn't revenge. It was simply the system working as designed, protecting itself from those who didn't understand its value until it was gone. The video hit Twitter at 7:23 p.m., just as Synthera's executives were drowning their sorrows in the 43rd floor bar. Someone with a conscience and a screen recorder had leaked the morning's emergency board meeting. Within minutes, it was everywhere. "We need to cut some fat from the demo." Amelia's voice rang clear through laptop speakers across the tech world. "All these AI behavioral modules, the redundant security layers, they're just showing off. Nobody's going to notice if we trim them for the presentation. We can add them back later." The timestamp showed 6:47 a.m. on launch day, 2 hours before the demo, 2 hours before she stood on stage and promised uncompromising security and AI-driven intelligence. But the damning part came next. Board member David Sterling, his voice cautious. "Shouldn't we consult with the infrastructure team?" Amelia's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "The infrastructure team works for us, not the other way around. Besides, we just cleaned house there. No more old guard engineers treating our code like their personal kingdom. Julian knows enough to make it work." The video ended with her typing on her laptop, manually disabling what she called Valerie's paranoid protocols, each deletion time-stamped, each one traceable to the security failures that followed. My phone buzzed. "Marcus. Val, I swear we didn't know she did this." I believed him. Marcus was many things, but he wasn't stupid enough to gut security protocols hours before a DoD demonstration. This had Amelia's fingerprints all over it. The confident ignorance of someone who'd never watched a system fail in production. Never felt the cold sweat of data corruption. Never stayed up for 36 hours straight nursing servers back to life. TechCrunch picked up the story first. Leaked. Synthera CEO deliberately disabled security before failed DoD demo. Then The Verge, then Ars Technica. By 8 p.m., it was trending on every platform. The video spread like digital wildfire, and with it came the hot takes, the memes, the brutal dissection of every word. Someone had already auto-tuned Amelia saying "paranoid protocols" into a surprisingly catchy remix. But beyond the internet's mockery lay a more serious issue. Synthera had lied to the Department of Defense. I pulled up my monitoring dashboard one more time. The internal chaos was glorious. Emergency board meetings, legal threats flying in all directions. Amelia's access revoked, not by Strata this time, but by the board itself. The logs showed frantic activity as they tried to understand just how deep the damage went. Then I saw something that made me sit up straight. Someone was accessing personnel files, specifically mine, not current ones, archived ones from my 15 years at Synthera, performance reviews, project histories, and most interesting, patent filings. They were building a case, either to bring me back or to sue me, possibly both. My doorbell rang at 9:15 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in a navy suit holding an iPad and looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Ms. Lennox, I'm Patricia Chen from Haversham and Associates. I represent Synthera's board of directors, not the executive team. May I have 5 minutes?" I let her in but didn't offer coffee. She sat on my couch like it might explode, clutching her iPad like a life preserver. "The board has terminated Amelia Breyer and accepted the resignation of several executives," she began. "We've launched an internal investigation into the technical decisions made without proper oversight. You need Strata," I interrupted, "and you need me to unlock it." She nodded. "The DoD has given us 72 hours to provide a working system or face contract termination and potential criminal charges for misrepresentation. You're the only—" "I know what I am." I sat across from her. "I'm the paranoid protocol writer. The legacy system. The fat that needed trimming. Patricia had the grace to wince. The board wasn't aware of the full scope of your contributions. The patents alone belonged to Synthara, I finished. I know. I signed them over. Every innovation, every breakthrough, every clever solution to an impossible problem, all legally theirs. Except Strata. The words hung between us. She knew. They'd done their homework in the last few hours, traced the development, realized that Strata had been built on my own time, on my own equipment, integrated into their systems, but never officially handed over. Strata belongs to them too, I said, watching her shoulders drop. Check the integration agreements. I gave them full usage rights, perpetual license, complete access. But not the activation protocols. No, I agreed. Not those. She pulled up a document on her iPad. The board is prepared to offer you a significant package, chief architect position, salary doubled, full autonomy over infrastructure decisions, reporting directly to the board, not the C-suite. No. We could go higher. It's not about money. I stood, signaling the conversation was over. They had something beyond price, a system built with 15 years of knowledge, trust, and dedication. They threw it away for a PowerPoint deck and a 26-year-old's vision of disruption. Patricia gathered her things, then paused at the door. The government contracts aren't just about money, Ms. Lennox. They're about national security. Real people could be hurt if these systems fail. She was right, of course. That's why I'd built Strata in the first place, because I understood the weight of what we were protecting. But they'd forgotten that weight the moment they decided I was expendable. Then maybe, I said, opening the door for her, they should have thought about that before they optimized away their architect. After she left, I sat in the dark, watching the city lights shimmer. The leaked video played on repeat across social media. Synthara's stock price plummeted in after-hours trading. Somewhere, Amelia Breyer was probably consulting with her own lawyers, trying to spin betrayal into innovation gone wrong. And in Synthara's servers, Strata waited, patient, protective, loyal to the end. They wanted it back. They needed it back. But they'd have to earn that privilege. And I wasn't sure they had enough time left to learn how. The contract arrived at my apartment at 10 a.m. Thursday, delivered by a courier who looked like he'd been told he was carrying nuclear codes. In a way, he was. Julian stood behind him, exhausted, unshaven, still wearing the same clothes from the demo disaster 2 days ago. Val, he said after the courier left, I found something you need to see. I let him in, more out of curiosity than kindness. He pulled out his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard with the desperate energy of a man running on caffeine and revelation. I've been going through everything, every document, every email, every legal filing from the past 2 years. Look at this. He showed me a contract dated 18 months ago. Caldera Systems, LLC, a small consulting firm that had provided specialized compliance services to Synthara. The signature at the bottom made me smile. Eleanor Lennox, my mother. You incorporated a company under your mother's name, Julian said, not accusingly, just with the wonder of someone appreciating a masterpiece. And you used it to license Strata to Synthara. I poured myself coffee, letting him continue his discovery. Clause 7.4, he read aloud. In the event of termination of Valerie Lennox from Synthara Technologies without documented cause related to performance, security breach, or criminal activity, all access rights to systems designated under Appendix J shall be suspended pending review by Caldera Systems, LLC. Appendix J, I said quietly, lists every critical system I've ever built for them. Julian's laugh was hollow. It's not just technical lockout, it's legal. We can't use Strata without violating the license agreement. The DoD could sue us. Hell, you could sue us. Your mother could sue us. My mother's been dead for 3 years, I told him. But Caldera Systems lives on. I'm the sole beneficiary and acting director. The full scope of what I'd done was dawning on him. This wasn't revenge planned in the heat of termination. This was protection engineered over years, layer by layer, like sedimentary rock. Every time Amelia or her predecessors had made decisions that showed they didn't value their infrastructure team, I'd added another failsafe. The board knows, Julian continued. They're meeting with legal right now. Some are pushing to challenge the contract, claim it was signed under false pretenses. Others want to negotiate. But Val. He looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd met him, the boy genius looked truly lost. Why didn't you just build in a back door? Why make it so complete? I sat across from him, remembering the eager junior developer he'd been 5 years ago, so excited about elegant code and efficient algorithms. Because backdoors can be found, I explained. They can be exploited, removed, turned against their creator, but a contract, a legal framework, that's infrastructure of a different kind. It doesn't live in the code. It lives in the space between the code and the company, just like Strata. So what happens now? I showed him the courier package. Synthera is offering me everything. CTO position, board seat, enough stock to make me wealthy beyond measure, all to come back and unlock Strata. You're going to take it? Read the fine print. He scanned the document, his frown deepening. They want all rights to Strata transferred permanently, no conditions, no clauses, and, oh, he found it, the paragraph that made everything else meaningless. They want me to sign a non-compete that would prevent me from ever building anything like Strata again. They want to own not just what I built, but my ability to build. They're so afraid of another Strata situation that they'd rather cage the architect than risk her creating another masterpiece elsewhere. Julian set down the contract like it was contaminated. That's not a job offer. It's a prison sentence. Now you're learning. My phone buzzed. Marcus, with a screenshot from Bloomberg. Synthera board in emergency session as DOD threatens contract cancellation. Below it, another message. Val, whatever you're planning, please, we have 12 hours. I stood and walked to my window. Seattle's morning was gray and misty, the kind of weather that made everything feel like a secret. Julian, I said without turning around, do you know why I let you shadow me all those months? Because the board made you? Because you reminded me of myself 20 years ago, brilliant, eager, convinced that code could solve everything. I faced him. But you never asked the right questions. You learned how I built systems, but not why. You studied the architecture but ignored the foundation. He had the grace to look ashamed. I thought I understood Strata. I thought I could maintain it. Strata isn't maintained. It's cultivated, like a garden, like a relationship. It needs someone who understands that infrastructure isn't about technology. It's about trust. So teach me, he said suddenly. Come back. Not for them, not for the board or the contracts or the money. Come back for those of us who want to learn what you really know. It was a nice speech. In another timeline, it might have even worked. But I'd already made my decision 18 months ago, when I'd signed those papers in my mother's name. When I'd built protection not just into the code, but into the very legal framework that governed it. I am teaching you, I said, handing him the contract. I'm teaching all of you. The lesson is this. When you build something vital, you protect it. When you create something irreplaceable, you ensure it can't be carelessly discarded. And when someone proves they don't deserve what you've built. I let the sentence hang, unfinished. Julian gathered his laptop, the contract, his shattered assumptions about how the tech world worked. At the door, he turned back. 12 hours, Val. After that, it's not just Synthera that suffers, it's everyone who depends on those systems. Then they'd better learn fast, I said, because Strata's already teaching them. Whether they pass or fail is up to them. After he left, I returned to my window. Somewhere in Synthera's towers, lawyers were reviewing contracts, engineers were attempting miracles, and executives were learning that some things, once broken, reveal the contracts that always existed beneath. Caldera Systems LLC was ready for whatever came next. My mother would have been proud. Part 8. The Architect's Final Move. 6 months later, I stood on stage at the Pacific Tech Summit, wearing a simple black dress and the kind of confidence that comes from building something nobody can take away. The auditorium was packed, standing room only. They'd come to hear about the Linux framework, the infrastructure system that had mysteriously appeared 3 months after Synthera's spectacular collapse. Infrastructure, I began, my voice carrying across the hushed crowd, isn't about code, it's about trust. It's about building something so essential that removing it reveals the void it filled. Behind me, slides showed the framework's architecture, clean, elegant, unmistakably evolved from principles anyone familiar with Strata would recognize. But this wasn't Strata. This was something new, something that belonged entirely to me and Caldera Systems LLC. In the third row, I spotted Julian. He'd left Synthera 2 months after the disaster, started his own company. We'd had coffee once. He'd asked me to consult. I'd given him advice for free. He'd learned the right questions finally. Marcus Walsh sat near the back, representing his new employer. Synthera had survived, barely. They'd negotiated a reduced contract with the DoD, hired an entirely new engineering team, rebuilt from scratch. It had cost them 2 years and most of their valuation. They were a cautionary tale now, mentioned in business schools as what happens when you mistake your foundation for furniture. The Linux framework, I continued, is built on a simple principle. The architect maintains a relationship with their creation, not ownership, relationship. We license it, we support it, we ensure it can never be orphaned by corporate decisions or abandoned by those who don't understand its value. The framework was already running in 12 major corporations. Each had signed agreements that couldn't be violated without losing access entirely. Each understood that they were custodians, not owners, of their infrastructure. The revolution wasn't in the code. It was in the contract. A hand shot up from the audience. A young woman, probably fresh from college, eyes bright with ambition. Ms. Lennox, what about companies that want to modify the framework? To innovate on top of it? I smiled. Innovation is encouraged. The framework is designed to evolve. But evolution requires understanding, not just ambition. Every company using our system has architects trained by us, bound by agreements that protect both innovation and stability. We learned that lesson from previous experiences. A ripple of knowing laughter swept the room. Everyone knew about Synthera. Everyone had read the case studies, the post-mortems, the brutal analysis of how a company could fire its own foundation. One last question, the moderator announced, from someone in the virtual audience. The screen lit up with a familiar face, Amelia Breyer, calling in from wherever disgraced executives went to rehabilitate their reputations. She looked older, harder, like someone who'd learned expensive lessons. Valerie, she said, and I gave her credit for using my first name, for the attempt at humanity. Do you ever regret what happened? Could it have been different? The auditorium held its breath. This was the confrontation everyone had come to see, packaged as a question about regret. Regret implies I had control over your decisions, I answered, keeping my voice neutral. I built what I was asked to build. I protected what needed protecting. When you decided my experience was a liability rather than an asset, the systems I built responded accordingly. That's not revenge. Amelia, that's architecture. I paused, letting the weight settle. Could it have been different? Of course, you could have asked why things were built the way they were. You could have valued understanding over disruption. You could have recognized that some things shouldn't be optimized away, but you didn't, and that's not my regret to carry. The connection ended. Whether she'd hung up or been disconnected, I didn't know, didn't care. The future of infrastructure, I concluded, returning to my presentation, isn't about building systems that can't fail. It's about building relationships that won't, between architects and their creations, between companies and their foundations, between innovation and wisdom. The applause started slowly, then built like a wave. I didn't bask in it. This wasn't about vindication, it was about prevention. Every company in that room, every engineer watching the live stream, every executive taking notes, They'd all learned something from Synthara's fall. As I left the stage, my phone buzzed. A text from my assistant. 17 new enterprise inquiries during your talk. 3 government agencies. 1 very apologetic email from the DoD about exploring future partnerships. I deleted them all. They'd go through proper channels if they were serious. The Lennox framework had waiting lists now, evaluation periods, architects who asked the right questions before agreeing to build. We were selective. We could afford to be. In the lobby, Julian caught up with me. Val, that was... He struggled for words. They'll be teaching this in every computer science program in the country. Good, I said. Maybe the next generation will understand that code isn't just logic, it's trust made digital. Break the trust. Break the system. He walked me to my car, where my driver, yes, I had a driver now, waited before I got in. Julian asked one last question. Do you think Synthara will ever recover? Really recover? I looked back at the convention center, at the streams of people emerging, all carrying the story of infrastructure that refused to be discarded. They're still in business, I said. They've learned to value their architects. They've rebuilt with respect for what they're building. In that sense, Strata did exactly what it was supposed to do. Protect the system? Teach them why it needed protecting in the first place. As we drove away, I didn't look back. Synthara was the past. The Lennox framework was the present. And the future? The future belonged to everyone who understood that some things, once built correctly, should never be carelessly thrown away. They'd wanted to run without their architect. Instead, they'd learned that architects don't just build systems. We build the invisible foundations that make everything else possible. And sometimes, we build in reminders of why we matter. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm curious, where are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're tuning in from. I love connecting with listeners from around the world. If you enjoyed this corporate revenge tale, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Valerie's position? Let's discuss in the comments.